welcome to this exclusive interview. I'm your host, Jerry from People Matters, and it's great to have you join us today. So, this interview is part of a week we're calling Building a Skills First Organization that's brought to you in partnership with Skillsoft, where we're helping organizations reflect on the change that's underway and define strategic priorities that will help them thrive. So we have with us AP for this conversation, and he's the General Manager of Talent Development Solutions and Chief Product and Technology Officer at Skillsoft. And he's responsible for overall strategy, product roadmaps, and the entire Skillsoft portfolio. In addition to it, he's responsible for engineering, cloud operations, and support for Skillsoft enterprise learning platforms. He's also responsible for digital and IT infrastructure across all areas in the Skillsoft group of companies. And AP has held this role since 2016. AP also has extensive experience in supporting rapidly growing technology companies like IBM and Sev1, where he was responsible for the on-demand and SaaS business segments. It's great to have you with us, AP. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, Jerry.
So, AP, as a technology leader, how do you envision the future of learning in the context of the current workforce transformation? And as this transformation evolves, what are some of the top trends that you're seeing that's probably going to be dominant in the next 5 years?
Great question, Jerry. Before I talk about trends in learning, let's talk about some macro socioeconomic trends, which makes learning more critical and important. The global birth rate, believe it or not, is falling. People are working longer through their lives, and technology change is becoming faster, which means through a normal career, people will go through 5, 6, 7 disruptions of technology, which will make learning to do things in a new way almost critical for survival. So it's not a good to have, it's a must have. The things that I see in the horizon right now over the next 3 to 5 years, in fact, it's very difficult to call anything after that, is learning becoming more interactive. I think, 11, 12 years ago, we saw a shift from PowerPoint on voice to video. Video is still a very passive medium. It will stay as a reference material, just like books have stuck around for thousands of years. But learning will become fundamentally more interactive and hands-on, right? Where you actually can prove something, that you can do something at the end of learning. Learning will also become more distributed. So you will not actually go somewhere to learn, right? You will learn from the context that you're in. So learning and capability to learn will be embedded in everyday applications, using APIs and then making calls into learning systems that are enabled by AI. And the last but not the least, there is an expectation to actually see real outcomes from learning. So organizations will invest in learning. They would like to see a real return on that investment, right? So any learning system or a provider must be able to provide objective evidence that somebody is progressing on a predetermined path and progressing toward a pretty measurable end goal. So I think 3 things I've told you: interactive, distributed, and outcome-centric.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear, AP. I think, more broadly in terms of what are some macroeconomic shifts that are sort of informing these shifts, I think it's very useful to know. I'm sure our audience will find this useful. Learning becomes more interactive and hands-on, distributed, and also everyday applications and outcomes are going to be important, right? So when we talk about the experience part of this, right, when you look at it from the prism of the learner, that is also sort of undergoing shifts with these technologies being introduced, right? So what do you think in terms of empowering the learner to really create a very engaging learning experience? Like you noted, I think 4 to 5 shifts in their career span, in their lifespan, that they will see technology change, right? So they really have to be on their toes almost. So what does this learner experience look like? And also, how does this shift augment for future readiness mandate?
So I think the learner experience will become immersive and interactive. But let's go to interactive first. Today, using generative AI, you can almost have a conversation with a learning system, right? And then learn in the flow of what you want to know, rather than going to a portal-like experience where there's a menu of things that you can choose from. Right? So fundamentally, interactive experiences are serving up just exactly what you need to know. For example, things like GPT or Google Gemini, they do that, right? They will become an expectation from the learner in terms of basic interactivity. Think of learning systems. Learning systems must provide that level of interactivity or better. Think of systems that teach you how to write code or teach you how to install something in a cloud system, right? A learner must expect and should expect that the system lets you do that hands-on.
Yeah.
They should not accept something which says talking about coding. So talking about coding is not coding, right? They would want to demand something that's all about hands-on practice. Similarly, in an area of soft skills, for example, talking about how to be a good manager is just talking about how to be a good manager. You listen and you retain probably 20% of what you heard if you're lucky. But if you're able to do a role play scenario virtually with somebody who is an AI enabled coach, for example, then you will remember a much different experience of facing a difficult situation. So role-based, scenario-based interactivity will become very critical to human skills training or power skills training. I already spoke about coding and labs, and that kind of training will become much more interactive, and learners should expect it, right? Learners should not accept anything that is completely passive. Yes, there is role for passive instruction, but it is a mixture of multimodal capabilities that will be very important for the learner to be successful, and learners should expect it.
That's great. That's great. I think it's moving from the way you're describing it, sounds from a very passive way of learning to more active, engaged, and you're practicing the skill itself, right? I think that certainly is very immersive, interactive, and hands-on. It sounds very exciting also. Right.
You can watch a video that, Lionel Messi scoring a goal from a free kick all day long, right? Versus trying to do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great example there. So what innovative approaches in this context do you think companies can really harness? I know you spoke about the role-based skill training and the praxis of, that will support the change in learner behavior, right? But are there any innovations in this space that's going to completely reshape learning journeys?
Yeah, so I think the innovation is primarily through intelligence, or let's call it artificial intelligence, right? Primarily, right? The innovations will come around changing completely the experience of learning. I'll give you an example. Rather than searching for a course or going to a portal to find a video-based course, you would start a conversation, right? You would start a conversation with, let's say, a super intelligent chatbot, right? Um, hey, I'm having trouble writing this specific Excel macro today. Can you help me? Um, it should come back and tell you, give me a description of what trouble you're having. No, I'm trying to design this particular pivot table and it's not working for me. Okay, tell me more about the pivot table. What are you trying to pivot on? What is the nature of the information in the pivot table? And then it's step by step, has a conversation with you. In the middle, it inserts a small video for 2 minutes, which shows how the basics of pivot table works, okay? And how to sort in a particular dimension of the pivot table. That type of learning will become much more predominant. That is a visualization of what I'm talking about.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I was just thinking back when you said the pivot table and macros example. about this, expert that we had in our office, and then everyone used to wait for him to be free so they could ask questions.
Right.
But now we can just have a conversation with this intelligence to guide us
Yeah.
in that journey.
Yeah. So
So
that's
I think
one way, I think I talked about interactivity. I think over time, immersive will also play a role. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but over time, the cost point of virtual reality and augmented reality devices will fall, right? Just like the laptop I'm using right now, it was unthinkable to use such a laptop 10 years ago. Right now, it's unthinkable for everybody to actually wear an augmented reality glass or a virtual reality headset. Those things will become much more cheaper, and therefore, it will also become an agent for immersive experiences. Think of merging virtual reality with AI and practicing a live presentation where you put a virtual reality goggles and you feel like you're in a presentation situation like a stage, right? And then you could have AI characters in the virtual reality presentation where they can actually act in a certain way. Somebody can be supportive, somebody can be disruptive, somebody can ask you hard questions as you're practicing the presentation. Think of that kind of a practice of presentation skills versus listening to a video about how to present something. So immersive and interactive will be, in the next 3 to 5 years, will be, I think, a basic expectation.
absolutely. That sounds very fascinating. I think the way you're framing it, immersive and interactive, it's also very futuristic, it sounds like. But what are some challenges that you're seeing in this context, AP? I think, of course, one is the digital maturity curve that companies are already on, right? And it'll differ from company to company, industry, sector, and so on. But what are some maybe common challenges that will pop up in this transformation that we're seeing and this change that we're seeing?
I think one of the common challenges that I see as I go around the world talking to learners and customers is a growth mindset and a leadership mindset. I think it is very possible and often very rewarding to always stick to the present, right? So I have something to do. I got to get it done tomorrow, right? I don't have even an hour to do something else. I'm so busy, right? And you can be that way for your lifetime, right? You can actually be that way for your lifetime. And at the end, what has happened is therefore you have not learned anything new, right? To do that, you need learners need a growth mindset personally, and leaders need to allow learners to have that mindset and allow either the time or well-designed programs for people to grow. So, for example, a department leader of engineering, if the department leader of engineering 3 years ago did not allow time for the engineers to learn DevOps or SecOps, those engineers would be outdated right now. Or engineers who have not learned DevOps or SecOps are actually outdated right now. So if all you did was came in and programmed in your office in a web portal interface, and that's all you did, you would actually be outdated right now. So I think the growth mindset in terms of learner and in terms of the leader is where everything starts. I think growth mindset allows for creative planning of work. Growth mindset allows for creative timing of learning. You could even listen to an audiobook to learn something useful when you're in a public transport. That's one way of learning. You don't have a computer open, it's inconvenient. You can't really watch because you don't want other people to see what you're exactly watching. But you can be creative, but that comes from a growth mindset. And that also comes from systems that support this kind of learning and multimodality. Systems that primarily show you videos are going to be outdated. Just like systems that primarily showed you PowerPoint presentations, just like, other ways of learning before.
That's great to hear, AP. I think some of these factors, the challenge areas that you're highlighting with growth mindset and a leadership mindset, are also very cultural to the company, right? I mean, I think if you have this culture of thinking from that perspective, I think it's much more easier for you to adapt to that mindset. Do you see technology like playing a role in fostering this? I mean, in terms of it augmented already, like this kind of questions or helping the reader if they are maybe not getting the answer right, just helping them with some prompting to foster this mindset. Is that something that will happen?
I think from industry to industry, from culture to culture, there's a wide variation, right? I definitely see that. You're 100% correct. There is a wide variation. The word culture is very important, right? There is somebody who said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So I think as senior leaders in a company, definitely they would design strategies. They have to present strategy to the board, but you never present culture to the board. It's very difficult to present culture to the board, right? Culture is something that you just do. You have to have a culture which rewards growth, which rewards performance, which rewards initiative. Without that, eventually, let's say an industry which is, let's say a manufacturing industry versus IT industry. They're different ends of the spectrum, right? But even the manufacturing industry is being disrupted by robotics, correct? So even industries that you would not consider suddenly in the forefront of everything else will be disrupted. So therefore, it comes straight from the top. It has to come from the CEO that growth mindset is not only encouraged, but is actually required for you to succeed in this company. So what I have seen, you said technology, more than technology, what I have seen are policies and the initiatives. So for example, a company that actually has a policy of growth will allow the employees to do innovation sprints or hackathons, company-wide innovation sprint or company-wide hackathon, right? Hackathon does not actually have to be on software. Company-wide creativity hackathon in the marketing department, for example, right? Company-wide HR hackathon in how to innovate our interview process. So when I say hackathon, don't focus on the word hacking. It's about creating motion and emotion around something new. And every CHRO, every CLO, every CIO, every CTO, every CEO should do this to change the culture. And they will find their people more engaged. They will find their people more productive and actually more appreciative of the company.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I think certainly, I think some cultures and organizations are more primed to do this. But as you're describing it, I think more and more companies should start thinking in this manner to really foster the growth mindset that we need. How do you really see successful companies navigating this transformation? I know we've already outlined some features as well, of what behaviors, what processes, systems, and policies they can put in place. Are there any examples of companies that are doing it really well, according to you?
Absolutely. I'll describe the companies in a abstract manner so that I don't take particular names. But so, for example, there is a customer of ours that had a business problem, right? That had a business problem, big business problem of transforming, let's say, thousands of data center engineers into cloud engineers. The company took an innovative approach because the chief operating officer told me he doesn't know where each employee is because he does not want to create an out-of-the-box program that some employees will be bored or it'll be overkill for them because they already know a lot of stuff about cloud, right? Because they have self-studying. So for them, it was very important to benchmark their whole population first. So having a system of benchmarking where you benchmark the whole population and decide on cohorts. Let's keep it simple: beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and then put those different cohorts in different learning journeys. Not only the speed increases, the efficacy and satisfaction of the learning increases. So I thought starting with a mass benchmarking was very innovative, right? it's like kind of taking a sample of where my population is, and I'm talking tens of thousands of people, right? Okay. That was kind of innovative. And that directly resulted in business outcomes for the company because, the company could place people faster into paid projects. Okay. Another company which took a very different approach was, they wanted to encourage first line managers to engage more with employees so that employees are much more productive, right? Or much more engaged. So they created a micro mentoring program or a micro coaching program using some of Skillsoft's capabilities. Okay, it composed of one-on-one coaching, one-on-one mentoring, and also some reference material from our leadership and business collection. And they basically upskilled the first-time managers or first-line managers using essentially a program like this. And then the first-time managers were then equipped to actually then have a productivity or engagement conversation with their employees. And different people took different approaches. Some departments started the ideas of hackathons that I told you, like Creative Fridays. Some departments started, kind of a leaderboard program on a journey on a learning journey. So different managers took different approaches based on their departments, but they learned the basic tools from the first-time manager program that I talked about. So in fact, agreeing to do the first-time manager program was in fact a great thing to do from the leadership of this organization. So those are a couple of good examples that I thought I'd share with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, AP. I think we also touched on this next question on learning outcomes, right? So, what are some new matrices in learning that you think are going to be important for the future? And how are companies doing with this? Like, are they aligned with these new ways of measuring? Do they need to fundamentally change what they're looking at? How are you seeing the trend evolve?
I think it's a very interesting question that you ask. We have, as practitioners in this trade, have kind of polluted the industry, with meaningless numbers and metrics, like number of video launches, number of course completions. At the end, who cares? And as long as we as an industry or our champions within the companies behave like that, the CEO will always look at learning as a cost center, but not actually a profit center that actually optimizes the business, correct? The way to align learning better with business outcomes is actually to use cases, okay? So I'll give an example of a couple of use cases. When you actually have a concrete use case, then you can have a beginning and the end, a measurement in the beginning, a measurement at the end that makes business sense, and not in terms of learning, but in terms of the use case. I'll give you an example. First-time engineer onboarding. So first-time engineer onboarding, engineers have different types of incoming backgrounds. Let's say you hire 100 Node.js engineers who are freshers from a college, and you're doing first-time onboarding. You don't really know where they are in terms of their innate knowledge. You can actually take the same approach the other company took that I told you about, benchmarks. Have them take benchmarks, either go through personalized learning journeys or go through cohort-based learning journeys. But at the end, pass an interactive assessment or an interactive benchmark where they actually show that they can perform these tasks in Node.js, right? So that way, you see exactly a measurement at the beginning, measurement at the end, assessment at the end, and you see how many people have gone through the journey successfully and what time it took, right? The faster you can onboard, you can say, now I have reduced the onboarding time of incoming engineers from 6 weeks to 4.3 weeks. That's a massive improvement for a company that, let's say, has 250,000 engineers. That's called faster onboarding as a use case, right? The use case of first-time manager, I told you. What are the metrics in that case? The metrics in that case could be engagement score in the manager's team, the amount of promotions that are internal promotions that are happening in the manager's team, or the amount of people who are being placed internally in other teams from that manager's team are actually very good measures of a successful manager, right? Because other managers want their people, right? So you can measure things like retention, rate of internal mobility, rate of growth of individuals in a department to actually rate a first-time manager. So then when you put the first-time manager through a first-time manager learning program, you measure that at the beginning of the year, measure those things at the end of the year, and see how much progress has been made. So you don't just put a first-time manager through a program and say that he has watched 25 videos, he has completed 50 courses, and he has gone through 23 hours of learning. That is not the measure. The measure is the people under him are higher engagement score, has not left the company, and gotten promoted internally. So those are the metrics.
Wonderful. I think that's just having such a more holistic view of the impact that that manager is having. So I think it's a really wonderful way to sort of reframe our learning priorities in terms of impact. And I think it certainly shows business alignment as well as impact. Thank you so much, AB, for this wonderful conversation. I think it was really packed with a lot of insights and a very futuristic perspective, right? From the emphasis on immersive to interactivity to the need for growth and leadership mindset. And the example that you just shared, I think it's really wonderful to see how we're evolving along with not just workforce expectations and worker learner needs, but really thinking through the business end of it and the business impact that learning is helping deliver. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Jerry. My pleasure.